Well, massive breaking news from Buckingham Palace this evening. Of course, the King has stripped Prince Andrew of all his royal titles and kicked him out of Royal Lodge. In a statement released earlier this evening, Buckingham Palace said His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has, to date, provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease, and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. The decision comes after weeks of mounting speculation, of course. Earlier this month, Andrew was stripped of his Duke of York title amid continued controversy over his links to the convicted paedophile Giuffre Epstein and an alleged Chinese spy. In the past few minutes, the family of Virginia Giuffre have released a statement. They said, "Today, an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage." Her brother Sky Roberts and sister-in-law Amanda said Virginia Roberts Giuffre, our sister, a child when she was sexually assaulted by Andrew, never stopped fighting for accountability for what had happened to her and to countless other survivors like her. Today, she declares victory. We, her family, along with her surviving sisters, continue Virginia's battle and will not rest until the same accountability applies to all of the abusers and abettors connected to Giuffre Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's understood that he will move to a property on a private Sandringham estate in Norfolk, which will be privately funded by the King. And GB News understands Sarah Ferguson will make her own arrangements and find her own home. Andrew's daughters, Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice, will retain their titles as they are daughters of a son of a sovereign. The King has acted decisively tonight amid increasing public murmurings about the future of the monarchy. Last week, the monarch was heckled during the scandal during a visit to Staffordshire.
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew's Charles? What do you think? Should the MPs be allowed to debate the royals in the House of Commons?
And this week, the politics magazine The New Statesman called for the abolition of the royal family on its front page. Meanwhile, Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, said it had instructed lawyers to investigate whether it could bring a private prosecution over allegations of sexual assault, corruption and misconduct in public office. So, has King Charles saved the monarchy tonight? Is this a new dawn for the British monarchy?
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade, and in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and journalist Linda Jubilee, former Conservative MP Alex Stafford, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Welcome, everybody. What an evening, hey? What an evening for breaking news. Linda, I'm very pleased you're here because you happen, amongst the many things you've done in your career, to have been a royal correspondent at some point, haven't you?
Many years ago.
Yes.
But I covered Sarah Ferguson in the early days and Prince Andrew. I've since met Sarah Ferguson at a private event. And that we have come to this does not surprise me. I think that the royal family and the royal household has known about many of these things for decades, presumably. So and understandably wanted to keep it quiet. I think that that Prince William is, if he's not exactly driving the bus here, I think he's a component part in the main strategy. I'm told that he did not want to live in close proximity to Andrew on the Windsor estate. That is why the move is to Sandringham. And if you think back a couple of weeks, you will remember that it was Prince William who said he did not want Prince Andrew to go to his coronation. Now, that implies he doesn't think the coronation's 2 decades away. It implies that the coronation might be much sooner than that, sadly. But, nevertheless, the implication is I do not want Andrew polluting my reign when I am king.
That is really what I've taken away from this. And having looked at Andrew's sort of ruthlessness, I mean, he has lived through very tumultuous periods of the royal family, hasn't he? With his own mother, of course, now his brother, breaking away from the royal family, and then Andrew, of course, throughout a very big period of his history. It seems to me that William's looking at this going, I'm having to inherit all of this at some point, and possibly some point quite soon. Harry and, of course, Andrew will be alive, what I would have thought given their ages, and perhaps we're talking maybe, sadly, that the coronation might not be as far away as many think it might be. Perhaps, of course, we're just speculating here. I hope the king is exceptionally well. But William just maybe wanting to get the house clean now.
Absolutely.
And stepping in for the...
And it's not just Virginia Giuffre's book, it's also Andrew Lowney's book, Entitlement, which came out several weeks ago now. But that talks about Andrew and his period as the UK trade envoy all over the world, combining so-called business trips at the taxpayer's expense with his golfing holidays and meeting contacts and networking at various embassies around the world to set up his own business interests, which are said to be quite fruitful, actually. It's interesting that the king will fund his wherever he lives on the Sandringham estate, but not Sarah Ferguson, I think. That's the rumour there.
That's
but
correct.
she has only just sold a £4 million house in Mayfair.
Oh, she's not going to be hard up.
She's not sort of a bubble to me.
I have sympathy for people, but not for people who are multi-millionaires. I think she'll be fine. I think she'll be fine. Well, Alex, because this is the backdrop to this, is over the last week, we've seen Parliament talking about this, opposition days, Liberal Democrats, the SNP putting motions in. Has the king been forced to act, do you think? Has the household perhaps been forced to act because they do not want... The last thing any monarch wants is scrutiny in Parliament.
Well, exactly. And to go back to your question about is it going to save the royal family, I don't think the royal family is saving, but it is modernising. You've gone are the days where you can sort of put the disgraced uncle or aunt off to a corner and just ignore it. It's going to be on the spotlight. William, Charles, they know that this will constantly be a millstone around their neck. They need to deal with it decisively. You can't keep covering up. And I think if you look actually in the wider political discussions about child abuse, about abuse generally, the days of things being covered up or ignored, even if you go back 10 years ago, look what happened in Britain and Rotherham, things were ignored. You can't do that nowadays. That's good. You have to shine a light on it. And I think the monarchy is responding to that, realising they're not just dealing with one individual, they're dealing with the whole sea change in politics, in the media, and they realise if they want the monarchy to survive, and that is, after all, I think the number one goal of the royal family is to survive, they have to be a modern family dealing with the issues in their own stable. Except this went wrong, this was bad, but actually dealing with it. The days of cover-ups just are not going to wash it, and this is why I think Charles and William clearly are working together, because they want any future monarchies to be on a strong footing, a rightful footing. Because they can only survive as a royal family with public support. And luckily,
absolutely.
public support has moved so far away from cover-ups, and they want this dealt with. The monarchy is actually at last embracing this change and saying, we will deal with our family.
And just to go back on the question of Fergie, GB News understands Sarah Ferguson could live with Andrew if she chose to, but we understand she's going to to do her own thing. Matthew, many people will ask the question, has the government had any hand in this? Because, of course, these are the sorts of things we find out well into the future. We will never know if they're... If ever, perhaps, these could be things that future generations might watch this show back and use it as historical record. Who knows? To say, governments have hands in this, don't they? The monarchy and the government are intertwined. Of course, the government is the monarchs. They serve at the monarch, at least. Matthew, David Lammy is the Lord Chancellor. He is actually in charge of the titles that the King is asking to be given back, at least. Do you have any understanding of perhaps how the politicians might work with the royal family on this?
Well, I think the government will be mightily relieved tonight because I think you were about to see the spectacle of MPs, frankly, of all parties, expressing their right expressing their right to question and keep questioning until they got some answers. I think it's been clear over the last few weeks that the Parliament wasn't going to put up with just the removal, of the titles. That they wanted the Prince they wanted the word Prince off his name, and they've got that. And therefore, I think that the government was obviously, remember initially when Keir Starmer was asked, "Oh, do you think he should, do you think he should come before committee? Do you think he should be?" And it was all sort of doing the standard thing, which is to say nothing, which every government does in relation to the royal family. I think behind the scenes, I think they will have made clear to the palace that actually MPs were going to kick up a fuss and they couldn't control that.
I think what's interesting is that the palace has never, ever got ahead of the narrative on this story. Right from the get-go, they're always responding to public pressure and they're always doing too little, too late. They needed to be decisive in a much bigger way earlier on.
Do you think that's perhaps where I'm not saying the conflict, because I don't think there's conflict, but the difference between William and Charles might be? Because we've heard William is unhappy for a very long time about this situation. I would say predating the royal titles being stripped from a long
time.
Yeah.
Years before.
So maybe my assessment of it is that Andrew has been pushing, that William has been pushing for this for a very long time behind the scenes, and actually Charles has gone, actually, do you know what, now I might need to listen.
Well, I think it fits in with what Alex was saying about, William's strategy was he always said he wanted a more modern European type monarchy. So he's been pushing for that all along. And this has been the big fly in the ointment.
However, the cynic in me also looks at the timing of this, because the palace would not have announced this without consulting with the government in some way or shape or form first. And the last couple of days have been terrible for Labour. Rachel Reeves is on the ropes, having day after day of budget speculation, and suddenly all the front pages, if I was a news editor now, all the front pages have been changed within the last couple of hours.
Funny you should say that. I had a lot to say.
Well, yeah, and it's like,
I'm sure Matthew,
you cynic. I know.
I had a lot to say about Rachel Reeves tonight, but
I think you'll squeeze it in.
I'll find a way.
I'm not saying this wouldn't have happened, but I just think the timing is quite interesting as well. Why is it today? Because I read in the paper today that they were almost given a 4-week deadline. I think some of the committees in Parliament talking about a four-week deadline, but the fact it's happened so quickly, one hand shows the decisiveness of it, the other hand shows maybe things have been moved forward. But,
I mean, I'm not uncynical, but I think it's just driven by the head of steam getting so big.
That's what I think. I think it's not a question of someone else's, news agenda or some sort of conspiracy thing here. I think the fact of the matter is that public opinion was shifting so quickly that the announcement had to come.
I think it was the heckle. I think the heckle. I think the chap who heckled the king. That's quite hard to say. Really. I mean, if you were the king, you would think, I've got to close this down now.
And also New Statesman and the polling out. That would not have been easy reading for the palace.
Absolutely.
Now it came out, the polling was yesterday or the day before. I mean, this is not what you want.
And sometimes, Alex, in communications, you get to a situation which I call sometimes bleeding out. It's just moving so quickly, you cannot get a bandage across it. You have to act.
Yeah, there's so much more I want to talk about in this story, because we can go back. I mean, there's rumours of a feud between Andrew and Catherine, of course, the future Queen. We've got, Jess Phillips, one of the most prominent ministers to speak out on this. And we were talking about this. We don't really hear politicians of ministerial level speaking out against anyone in the royal family. Public Accounts Committee. There's a lot to dig into here. So, of course, this story is not going anywhere this evening. I'm sure you appreciate it. But we do have other things we'd like to talk about with you, by the way, including Rachel Reeves. I will get there. I promise you, Matthew. I will.
Can't wait.
In the meantime, there's very